Hi, and welcome to the program Ask the First Selectman. And here he is, our first Selectman, Tim Herbst. Thank you for taking time once again to be here and answer these questions that we have from the public. They call them in, so if you hear one you don't like, don't throw anything at me.
I won't.
They're not my questions.
I promise you.
They're from the public, and thank you for doing that once again. So let's move right on to the very first question. How can we find out if and when the various schools' security systems are being updated? If no infrastructure changes are planned for a given school, how do parents petition to change this?
Well, I should point out that in the wake of December 14th, 2012, Sandy Hook, a lot of school districts in the state of Connecticut, and especially in the area, made it a priority to make certain security enhancements to buildings. So we spent probably $1 million shortly after Sandy Hook making security enhancements to each and every one of our school buildings. Notwithstanding the investment that we made a few years ago, security and enhancements to security and protocols regarding school security need to be monitored and enhanced on an ongoing basis. So if a parent thinks that there is a security breach at a school, if they think there's something that should be done that isn't being done, what I would prefer that the parents do is, rather than post it on Facebook or social media and announcing it to the world, contact Dr. Chaffee or contact Chief Michael Lombardo of the Trumbull Police Department, bring it to our attention, and then we will have our emergency management team assess it and determine if there is a security breach, and if there is, we'll correct it.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. What is the current status of the probate court move to Monroe? Is this move based on a handshake, or is there a written tri-town agreement that defines shared expenses?
Well, the current agreement has been a handshake agreement for more than 50 years. The probate court has been located at the Trumbull Town Hall going all the way back, I believe, to the first term of Judge Aram Talalian, before Judge Chioda was elected in 1978. So this has been a very long agreement. That's been a handshake agreement. And one of the problems that I have with the existing arrangement, in addition to, and most importantly, the fact that we have a serious space constraint at the Trumbull Town Hall, is for the last 50 years, we have been host to this court, and we have not received any type of expense reimbursement from the other two towns. So we've paid for heating and cooling and any type of ancillary expenses related to the facility itself, and we have not gotten reimbursement from the other two towns. So currently I'm working with First Selectman Vavrick and our respective public works departments. We're examining a plan to put the probate court at Chalk Hill Middle School. That functioned as the temporary Sandy Hook Elementary School pending the new construction. The new Sandy Hook is set to open this fall for the kids in Newtown. So Chalk Hill Middle School will be a very large vacant building. And I know that First Selectman Vavrick is looking at municipal uses that he can put into that building, like his Parks and Recreation Department, other uses. Judge Rowe has toured the facility. He likes it. It is handicap accessible, has an elevator, has an auditorium, so if there are large hearings for the probate court in let's say, contested matters, the judge doesn't have to worry about having adequate space. There's enough room for his chambers, for office space, for conference space, and I think that the cost to retrofit the classrooms to make them conducive for judges' chambers and the probate court are going to be much less expensive than what was contemplated here in Trumbull. I should also point out that going forward, and I've said this to Judge Rowe, and I think he agrees, I think that the three towns need to get beyond the handshake agreement, and they need to have a written agreement where we clearly delineate the costs that will be incurred by each municipality. Those costs should be prorated based upon our population, so arguably Trumbull will pick up most of that, but we need to clearly delineate roles and responsibilities, but that's where we are currently.
Thank you. Good question and a very detailed answer. Let's look at the next one, because the new artificial turf, this is our turf war question, by the way, about turf wars. New artificial turf is being proposed for the high school, okay, and the soccer fields and such, I understand. Why are we saving the old turf that's from years ago when we put new turf on the football field? Why are we saving that piled near the football field? It's been there quite a while, according to this viewer.
Well, that pile has slowly but steadily been decreasing, and the reason why it was saved was because there was a determination made that perhaps we should see if we can utilize this for our cross-country trails, which, as you know, when kids run cross-country, they go through some terrain that can be dangerous when they're running. I should point out that some of the sports organizations in town that are not at Trumbull High School, but Little League program, Babe Ruth, they've utilized a lot of that turf for practice cages and simulations and things of that nature. So it's being used by other organizations in the town, and I think that's a good thing because we're reusing what we already paid for, and we are allowing younger sports organizations to utilize it. So when they get to the high school, they're used to using turf. They've been exposed to it. They've seen it. So I know Mark Deming, our Director of Facilities for the Board of Education, is working very hard to outsource that, and we're close to completely outsourcing that.
Okay, terrific. Moving on to another question. The recent Conservation and Development Plan reads that the town's goal is to preserve single-family housing and neighborhood character while encouraging new housing for elderly and affordable housing for families. Is this a suggestion or an active development plan? And please explain that.
I think it is a suggestion in the form of a blueprint. So the Plan of Conservation and Development is a blueprint for the town. Where are we going to go over the next 10 years? That's the whole purpose of the plan. So it's a suggestion that the Planning and Zoning Commission now needs to take and work with their planning staff to develop a regulation that allows for it. A regulation that basically achieves what was just in the premise of that question. How do we maintain the character of our single-family homes, our residential zones, while at the same time providing for perhaps multi-unit housing for not only our young people but our elderly. We've done that with the age-restricted elderly housing zone in various areas of the town. I can tell you that one of the things we're working on, I had a meeting this week with the Director of Economic Community Development and our town planner. We are looking at existing zones in the town, and we are determining a strategy to bring in a consultant, money's already budgeted, to bring in a professional, to look at the zoning regulations, look at certain areas of the town, and determine if there are ways we can rezone existing areas of the town to achieve those very objectives.
Okay, moving on. If Trumbull still, is Trumbull still falling short of the state mandate that 10% of its housing units be affordable to households earning under $60,000 a year?
Short answer is yes, and I'll give you a detailed answer.
Okay.
My biggest problem with the state affordable housing law, which is commonly known as 8-30G, it's called the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Procedure, is that the town of Trumbull is mandated to have 10% of its housing stock as affordable, as referenced in the question. We're currently at about 5.54%. So we're a little more than halfway towards our goal. But the challenge is, how do you achieve the 10% in a town that is 98% developed without compromising existing residential zones or existing zoning classifications for housing? So this is where the community needs to be cognizant of the fact that as we come out of the recession and as the economy improves and as the housing market improves, there are, believe it or not, a lot of 5-acre parcels remaining in the town of Trumbull. We have a 9-acre parcel off of Daniels Farm Road. We have a 25-acre parcel off of Churchill Road in the A zone, which is basically the heart of our residential, where if somebody wanted to bring in an affordable housing application, what they could do is petition, and even if the commission denies them, they then use the state law to put the burden of proof on us to say, well, they only have 5.54%, and you've mandated that they have 10. And I can tell you in the 1990s, when Ken Hallaby, one of my predecessors, was chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we had a lot of these shoved down our throat by the court system. I can tell you that we have an application for a 9,000 square foot medical office building on Main Street across from the mall. It has become very contentious and personal between the owner of the property and the abutting property owners. This property owner has said that if we can't work something out, he's going to file an affordable housing application. We have right now in Lower Long Hill, in the heart of Gunther Village, one of the most historic neighborhoods, one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in all of Trumbull, we have an individual that's trying to put 26 units of affordable housing on 2 acres. 2 acres and change. It's a problem. So the law needs to be changed. It's an awful law. I've dealt with it as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as its chairman, now as the first selectman. But we also have to, as a community, start having a conversation. Do we want to start re-engaging in the acquisition of open space parcels that the town can preserve or the town can control to determine a future land use plan, so we're not reacting to these types of affordable housing applications? And you know what the shame of it is? They don't, under the state law, it doesn't provide affordable housing, because only 1/3 of these developments have to be quote unquote affordable as defined by the state. So all you're really doing is, zone busting in the name of affordable housing and just putting as many units as you can on an acre, and you're not providing true affordable housing for those that need it. It's a joke. It really is. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, that's okay. We need some jokes to lighten up the program. Let's look at another question. Does Trumbull have any age-restricted affordable housing zones? And there's the abbreviation you were referencing. Are there plans to expand this since there are so many seniors wanting to age in place?
That's one of the things we're going to look at. We do have an age-restricted elderly housing zone, 55 and older. There are certain requirements that any type of age-restricted elderly housing zone has to be on a state highway. There's certain radius requirements that you can't have one as close to another. But we're going to look at the regulation and determine if, to my point just made earlier, are some of these other parcels I mentioned, are they better to be 55 and older, where Trumbull seniors can downsize and age in place, and the market dictates the size of the units, the sale price of the units, and the commission dictates the number of units, how they look, how many on an acre, versus an affordable housing application that'll be dictated by certain tenets and laws of the state that perhaps is something we don't want. So that's another conversation we need to have as a community. I like age-restricted housing. I want Trumbull seniors to age in place. My parents, I won't say how old they are, but they're not quite senior citizens, but they're getting there, and they have a 2,800 square foot colonial, and I think eventually they're going to want to downsize and maybe get something down south and split their time. So I know they want to stay in Trumbull, and I know there are a lot of people, a lot of friends of theirs, a lot of people in the same situation that would want to do the same. So I think we're going to have to really look at that regulation if there's ways we can expand it in a responsible way.
Okay. Right. Let's move on. Trumbull passed a new sewer agreement with Bridgeport. What are the terms of the agreement, and when did they begin? And summarize this.
I'm going to try. This is very complex, so I'm going to try to explain this in a way that the average Trumbullite can understand. We were involved in a 7-year legal battle with the city of Bridgeport concerning how we treat our effluent. The original agreement was negotiated in 1998 under Mayor Ganem's first administration and under first Selectman Dave Wilson, who was 3 predecessors in front of me. Yep. That provided for a certain discount rate for our residents because we don't use both plants, we only use one. They have a west side and east side. So the terms of this deal, basically, originally the city of Bridgeport wanted to eliminate our discount rate entirely. They wanted to direct bill our users, and they attempted to attach certain accounts under the custody of the Trumbull WPCA. This deal basically keeps a discount rate for Trumbull ratepayers that will phase out over a 10-year period. They will not be able to direct bill our users, and under this agreement, we have received basically a blessing from Bridgeport to pursue alternate options. So I can tell you that we are looking at alternate options with Stratford and Fairfield, or with a combination of both. I don't think we can build our own plant because it's going to cost well over $100 million. I don't think we can afford that on our own. If we can't afford it, we still need to get DEP to approve us to build our own plant. And let's say we do those two things. The third question, which is the biggest, where are we going to put it? And that becomes, now you're going into neighborhoods, and that's a whole nother kettle of fish. So the deal basically keeps the discount rate, doesn't direct bill our users, allows Trumbull to proceed with an alternate pathway to treating its effluent, which long-term will reduce rates. If we can come up with a plan to go to Stratford or Fairfield, which is my very, very strong preference, we will be able to reduce sewer use rates, because here's why this deal was short-sighted when it was made in the 1960s. We're not only paying to go into their system, we're paying to upgrade our system. And that's where the high costs come in. So we need to avoid that. And I'm confident with the agreement we've reached, which, by the way, there were members of the Bridgeport City Council who spoke against the agreement. It ultimately passed, but they said we were getting a free ride and made a whole host of other comments. So when I hear comments like that, that tells me we negotiated a pretty good deal, because there were a lot of them that weren't happy with that. But now that that's behind us, now we have to focus on a plan forward. I've had conversations with Mayor Harkins about, long-term, can we connect to Stratford? We've had conversations with Fairfield, and we have worked with our engineers to look at, okay, if we can't go to Stratford exclusively or Fairfield exclusively, can we go to both? Can we split the town in half, and west side goes to Fairfield, east side goes to Stratford, and then we finally solve what has been a long-standing quagmire for the town.
Good.
So I hope I answered that
Good luck with it.
in a non-complex way.
Right, you did.
It's a complex issue.
It is, and so thank you for that
thank you.
summarized complex answer.
My pleasure.
Let's move on here. If you're taxpayer, in your taxpayer letter, you state that every Trumbull resident will see a reduction in their property tax this year. Mm-hmm. But my July 2016 tax bill, this viewer's tax bill, showed a $300 increase to my annual taxes. If every resident got a reduction, why did my taxes go up?
Because their property was inherently undervalued.
Yeah, it's the assessment. Some assessments went up and some didn't.
You see, the problem is there were, for example, I looked at certain valuations in certain pockets of town, ironically age-restricted units, where the values and the assessments were far below the market rate and far below what some of the units were selling for. So, when you're dealing with, 12,000 households or, 12,000 units that need to be assessed, while overwhelmingly there was a tax reduction, there were pockets of places where properties were undervalued. And what that means is other taxpayers were subsidizing other properties being undervalued, which isn't fair. So, for example, former First Selectman Baldwin had about a $250 tax reduction. Former First Selectman Ken Halby had a $700 tax reduction. I had a $14 tax reduction. But I'm glad they went down. They didn't go up, but they were different. But the important thing is the mill rate came down.
Right.
The mill rate came down, and that's important. And the reason why the mill rate came down is twofold. One, we reduced expenses in a very significant way. While our expenditure increase went up, we saved $3 million on health insurance, converting to the state partnership plan. $3 million, while providing our employees with better health care. And the grand list saw robust growth with, I believe, a 9.5% increase in the commercial grand list alone. So the combination of expenditure reductions with revenue growth allowed us to reduce the mill rate. But we also have to understand that property taxes are based upon the assessments on our property, the values on our property, and some properties were undervalued at the expense of other taxpayers. So in the interest of fairness, we have to make sure that all properties are fairly valued and fairly assessed.
I can support that a little bit because when I'm not pulling rabbits out of hats or being a TV star, I do tax software for one of our fire districts. And so I'm looking at all of the Nichols assessments, and I noticed that the vast majority went down, but there were some that did go up with their assessment. Let's go to the next question. When at government meetings in the town hall chamber, the audience can never see what the presenter is presenting to the boards. Is this deliberate? When are we going to join the modern world and project presented plans on an in-room TV?
Couldn't agree more. That's why we need a community center. That's why we need a community center that is 21st century ready, that can allow community meetings to take place in a way where those that are in attendance can see what elected representatives are looking at.
So you think the chamber, the meetings will move to that facility?
I think they could.
Rather than, well, okay.
I think they could. I think they should. For example, look, we have a courtroom that functions as Judge Rowe's chambers, as the council chambers, as where the Board of Finance holds meetings. But I think, and I envision, community space that addresses the very premise of that question, where people will be able to participate or view things that are presented to legislative bodies in a 21st century ready environment. Look, the town hall is not 21st century ready. The library is not 21st century ready, and the construction of a community center that is 21st century ready is part of an overall plan that was articulated in the Plan of Conservation and Development that addresses all these priorities. Recommendation 1 in the plan of 2014 plan. Recommendation 1, community center. Recommendation 2, senior center. Recommendation 3, renovations and modernization of library. And inherent in those recommendations was that they all be part of a centralized municipal campus. So there's no point in having a plan that you spend a lot of money on if you're not going to follow the plan. We have a plan in 2014. We have vetted it in 2015. We're proceeding with implementing that plan in 2016.
Okay. Time permitting, we'll have some more questions about that, because the viewers did send us some. What's the town doing about the fecal matter issue that has caused our pools to close on an almost daily basis? Okay. And we don't have to explain what that is, I hope, but have at it.
Wow. It's probably the toughest question of the day.
It's a stinky question.
It's a stinky question, it is. I have been briefed on this regularly by Stuart McCarthy, our Director of Parks and Recreation. Look, I can't control when a person decides to relieve themselves in a pool. But parents need to be cognizant if they think their child's going to do something like that, they probably should not be putting them in a community pool. I hate to sound crass when I say that, but if this problem's happening every day, if your child has a problem knowing when to go and not to go, you probably should not be putting them in a community pool with other people. Because when you do that, the problem continues to exacerbate. So what's the town doing about it? Look, I've said if there are repeat offenders, I've said to Parks and Rec, if this is happening with the same set of people every day, you need to tell them, look, either we get with the program or you shouldn't be coming in the pool. I hate to be like that, but it gets to a point where if you have repeat offenders that are affecting hundreds of people, you got to deal with the repeat offenders. So notwithstanding that, if it's a broader problem, it's a problem that people that are using the pool and parents that are taking their kids to the pool need to deal with.
And it's a kind of thing that you don't necessarily think about, but should, and maybe don't realize that's happened. Hopefully, everybody's going to hear you say that, because they're all going to tune in or log into the station and hear you say that. We don't
want to be number one in a number two business. I'll just put it that way. So
next question.
Correct that.
Will we ever get the fireworks show back in Trumbull? We miss our family tradition of watching them together.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a fireworks show at the Fall Festival. We had it last year. We're going to have it again this year. And I have to tell you that the fireworks show was outstanding last year and the year before. So we will have fireworks at the Fall Festival in September, and I encourage everybody to come.
Okay. Next question. Who's paying for the reconstruction of Daniels Farm Road and all the other roads that Mark IV destroyed? Says this viewer. Says this viewer.
Well, you know what? That's another thing we've been dealing with the last 7 years. When I was elected first selectman in 2009, the project in contract 3, which is the Daniels Farm Jog Hill section, was completed, grossly mismanaged. People were hit with very high sewer assessments. I don't have to tell people that drive up and down Daniels Farm Road in that area the condition of the roads. And at the same time I came into office, contract 4 had just begun, which was North Nichols. We immediately put in place controls and oversight in contract 4 to make sure the same problems did not repeat themselves. And I think you can appreciate it living in North Nichols and seeing your end product versus the Daniels Farm end product. We got it right in North Nichols, thank God, because we put in the necessary reforms before the same problem repeated itself. But at the same time, we had to address contract 3. So the town, at my direction, initiated litigation against the contractor. At the same time, the contractor initiated litigation against the town for what we were withholding on North Nichols. We withheld their retainage. We did not honor all of their change orders. We took the paving away from them to save in excess of $1 million. Because, you know, I can say this now because it's been settled, but when you're in litigation, leverage is important. And we had leverage. So the tenets of this deal are as follows. We brought Contract 4 and Contract 3 to the table to settle things globally. Under the Mark IV Contract 3 settlement, they are required at their expense to make all point repairs, all chimney repairs at their expense. The actual chimneys that are going to be replaced, when we bid that out, we determined that the cost of them doing it with supervision would be cheaper than bidding it out on the open market and having another contractor come in. So we've saved about $1 million by doing that. They're supposed to get most of those repairs done in the area of Daniels Farm and Jog Hill this summer before school commences in the fall. And we timed the settlement for that very purpose. We also received funding from our insurance company to recover certain funds to help cover the cost of this. And in exchange, we have released their retainage. Now, retainage is their money, but we held that because we wanted to get this fixed. We've released that retainage. We only honored 27% of their change orders, which did not happen on the previous project. And we have a release signed from them on that as well. So this was the best of a very bad situation, because I can tell you, if we had gone to trial, based upon the negligence of former town officials and employees, we would not have been able to secure this deal had it gone to trial. So they're covering most of these repairs at their cost, but we have to fix what's underground before we address paving. And what the Public Works Director has done, very artfully, is that in the annual capital plan, he has worked in a series of these Contract 3 streets over a period of time to address the issues that were referenced with respect to the paving itself. I have to tell you that if you're going to make paving part of any future sewer project, my recommendation would be that the town include the street paving component in its capital budget and do not allow the sewer contractor to assume that responsibility. We got into a lot of trouble with that, and if you look at other areas of town that were sewered by this contractor in the last 15 years, you're running into a lot of the same paving problems. Proof of that is Stonehouse Road. Stonehouse Road was part of a sewer project, and we had to repave that about 6 years ago because it was in just a deplorable condition.
Yep. Okay. What community center programs will be offered to drive the size and location of the new center? You started to answer that already. Mm-hmm. How does the town know what to offer if the community has not responded well to a survey?
Well, I would look at things in the broader sense. The other day, Ken Halby, who I referenced earlier, he originally proposed a community center in 1999 when he ran for first selectman. He conducted a survey. He received 1,700 responses. He saved those responses. We chronicled those responses to compare the 2001 survey to the 2016 surveys. And what has been consistent over time, irrespective of the sampling, irrespective of the scientific sampling, overwhelming support for a community center. And 88% of seniors that took the senior center survey said they do not use the current senior center based upon lack of programs, location of the center, and condition of the center. So when people say the community has not been surveyed enough, I sent a town-wide letter to every Trumbull taxpayer saying, notwithstanding the multiple surveys that have been done from 2001, the focus groups and public hearings and dialogue that occurred in 2012 and 13 when we adopted the 2014 Plan of Conservation and Development, and then the surveys in 15 and 16, notwithstanding all of these surveys, we are going to establish an email, Trumbull Community Center at trumbull-ct.gov. And I want you to email me directly and email the committee directly and tell us your preferences, what you like, what you don't like, whether you want it, whether you don't want it, what programs should be integrated. And Jim, roughly 12,000 of those letters went out. And they went out 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. We have received less than 50 emails. So look, I'm all in favor of people being surveyed, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Okay.
So people need to participate. If they want to voice their opinions, they come to meetings, they email the committee, they participate in the online survey. That online survey was online for 5 months and was pushed by the committee, by the administration, by the media. It was on social media. So if people have enough time to get on social media to complain about things, they should have enough time to get on social media to participate in things where their input is sought on behalf of the community. I keep coming back to the Plan of Conservation and Development. It's a plan. It's a blueprint. We made a plan. We adopted a plan. We heard from the community. The Planning and Zoning Commission adopted the plan. The Town Council adopted the plan. It's a 10-year plan. You have a plan, you implement the plan, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, just as a guy who's worked with surveys a bit, most of the surveys you described are what are called self-selecting surveys. It means that the people who participate take it upon themselves to participate, okay? So it doesn't necessarily reach the large body, and it doesn't have a whole lot of scientific validity. So as you survey, now the focus groups you mentioned, you've carefully selected those focus groups, trying to include representatives broad. That's a good way to go. But the self-selecting surveys, they're good because they get input from those who want to give input, and that's valuable. But it's not a real scientific survey. So, just so you know that, for future reference.
To your point, a Facebook petition that gives a negative connotation to the petition before it asks people to sign it is also not a scientific survey.
You bet it's not.
So I have seen a whole host of things where how this has been framed to the public has been distorted. Look, we discussed this in 2001. There was overwhelming support. We discussed this in 2012, 13, 14. It is the first key recommendation in the Plan of Conservation and Development. And even if the selected surveys were not self-selected, were not as scientific as one might claim, I find it very hard to believe that an 85 to 15 result would be that skewed to go in the reverse.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor it a whole lot, but another example for that would be there was a senior center survey, or seniors, but that was done for people that are part of the senior center, right?
People that are seniors.
And we've discussed earlier on this program, that represents a very small percentage of the seniors in Trumbull. But just so it's not representative of the seniors, it's representative of those that are currently using the senior center. And their opinions matter. They're important.
Of course they do, and as do people that are going to use the community center. And what I find interesting is the people that yell the loudest about the lack of community participation were the same people who thought it was okay to proceed with a $73 million renovation of Trumbull High School with 800 survey responses. 800 survey responses for a $73 million project. So people can't have it both ways. If they want to elicit feedback, they can't pick and choose when they elicit feedback and whether that comports with their agenda.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next question. What is the total anticipated expenditure for the new community center? Will there be multiple non-referendum amounts, or is the overall total cost to be $8 million?
Well, the whole purpose of the building committee hiring an architect is to help them develop the parameters which will guide the cost. You can't put a number on it until the committee and the community tell an architect what they're looking for. An architect can also help in determining designs that are value-based, that reduce the expense or reduce the cost of constructing the facility. So I think the committee understands that there is a dollar amount here we do not want to exceed. We have a $15 million threshold in the charter where it would have to go before the voters. Have to go before the voters. So they're cognizant of that. I don't think the $8 million figure that was cited in that question is by any means a hard number. And I should also point out that we spend $10 million a year upgrading our school facilities in our capital budget. $10 million a year. So if we're going to make a one-time expenditure of, put a number, $4, $5, $6 million, $7 million, a one-time expenditure on a community facility that's going to service the entire community for generations at a time when borrowing money in this environment, especially for a municipality, you're never going to be able to borrow money again for rates this low. This is the window of opportunity.
We're going to move on now and wrap up, I think, pretty quick. This is where people can, what's being shown on the screen Absolutely. To viewers is where we hope people will contact us with your questions. It won't be a scientific survey of questions, but please, but they're valuable and they're important, and we want to hear them. We want to give you a chance to answer them. Remember also that this program and all of our major important programs, you can also see on your computer, or you can see them on TV. On TV, you can go to Charter, channel 194, and on Frontier, channel 99. But you also can watch anytime, as I mentioned, on your computer. Yes. Probably the future of TV.
That's where I watch it.
Me too. You watch it, and you just go to www.trumbleps.tv and go to the Watch Now section, and you can look at programs back several years even, and some programs get posted there even before we broadcast them on the air. So you can actually watch them earlier than their broadcast date. Just go there and watch them and pause to go get potato chips and come back. At any rate, those are some choices you got. Tim, I want to thank you so much on behalf of the channel for once again taking the time to be with us, candidly answer the questions that our viewers have sent in. Once again, I think you've done an outstanding job, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.